All right, today we're talking with Jake Kobrin, who is he's an artist, he's a YouTuber. I'm sure there's more about him that I don't know, but I wanted to introduce you guys to him. He's got a lot of amazing stuff that I know we're going to talk about a lot of. This is going to be a very wide-ranging conversation. So welcome, Jake.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I kind of found you through YouTube within the last month, very recently, and you do a lot of interviews with. It seems like the focus is kind of magic, the occult, psychedelics, spirituality, and art. That I would say. Am I missing any big element?
Those are the main subjects. I've had a few psychotherapists on the show, and I'm also interested in psychology. It's basically, it's broad ranging. I've had a couple scientists and researchers, but generally within the field of consciousness, psychedelics, things like that. And definitely the occult, magic, and visionary art have been primary interests of mine.
Cool. Well, I think that interests my audience, whatever audience I have. I don't know if it's going to help your channel at all or not, but I hope it does. Or at least also actually Instagram. You seem like you have like over 30,000 subscribers, right?
Yeah.
And so I guess maybe could you like kind of give us a maybe a 5 minute autobiography, just to hear like what your path has been.
That's like one of those dating game questions, like 4 minutes to tell your life story.
Well, I
But
mean,
yeah,
you're welcome. You're welcome to make it longer if you want. I just don't. I feel like I don't want to like. If you don't want to like, I'm sure there's a lot of things that you'll have to leave out. But just like the major
sure.
elements.
I was born and raised in San Francisco, California. I'm a visual artist primarily, and I've always been interested in magic, mysticism, the occult, and spirituality. Part of that was influenced by my father as a Buddhist teacher and a psychologist. So I became interested in meditation and Buddhism at a young age. But also at the same time that I was exploring Buddhism, I was also exploring the Western esoteric tradition. I started reading books by Aleister Crowley and people like that when I was in high school. And that kind of actually dovetailed with interests in heavy metal music at the time. Interestingly, it's kind of funny to look at the journey and see how metal music kind of led me into meditation and consciousness exploration and stuff like that. But I've always been an artist, and I had a lot of interesting formative experiences with psychedelics, as well as in the context of meditation experiences, Vipassana retreats, things like that. And so I always wanted to try to communicate these abstract and tangible experiences that are difficult to put into words into the context of my art. And last year I started a podcast and YouTube channel that you mentioned, the Quarantine Sessions, where I've had the opportunity and privilege to interview some of my heroes, people whose books have greatly enriched my life, as well as artists who have deeply inspired me. So it's been an amazing and really rewarding project. And I'm sure you know what it's like to just have the opportunity to converge with some amazing minds in a container like this.
Yeah. It's actually I was thinking I hadn't really thought about this until we decided we are going to talk, but like these interviews, in a sense, I don't like I said, I don't know nearly as much about magic or the Western magical tradition as you, but like to me, these interviews are kind of a form of magic in that you kind of, you have kind of this, you create a ceremony, a Zoom interview or whatever, and, you invite somebody in. So it's like you create this parameter of how you think it's going to be, but then it could go anywhere. You don't know where it's going to go. And it's, I think that's maybe something similar with magic. Like you create something or you like invite something in, and sometimes it happens how you want, sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes it's you just never know where it's going to go. But so what for people that aren't like very familiar with magic, what has been like kind of your key? I mean, you talked about Aleister Crowley, but like what is I guess what I would say is why do magic? Yeah.
Well, I think that magic is inherent to human nature. What I mean when I say magic, if you want to use Crowley's definition, magic is the science and art of causing change and conformity with will. What that means is any kind of intentional action to achieve a specific result. So theoretically, if you're trying to build a saving money is a form of magic, or if you're trying to get a date, asking that girl on a date is a form of magic. But you can supercharge these intentions as ways of kind of working with your mind, almost like a biocomputer, programming specific. Magic is a specific kind of like coding language for our psyche, right? I've heard it described as weaponized psychology. For me, it's a way of regaining kind of autonomy, sovereignty, and creative power over our lives, our minds, our consciousness, and our circumstance. And it provides, through the lexicon of the Western esoteric tradition, as well as the Eastern esoteric tradition, a huge number of different practices and techniques to be able to explore our consciousness and have very interesting experiences, most of which have been the subject of my art.
Yeah. Do you consider art in general like magic? Like, is there art?
Absolutely.
Is there art without magic, or can you do magic without? I mean, I think of kind of magic as creative in some sense. Even if you're not creating art, you're at least you're creating a new form, like aspect of your own personality, or you're doing some kind of creative act. And yeah, I could see that with your art. So
Sure.
what, I guess I'm sure you maybe have a lot of different ideas about what you're trying to do with each piece that you're working on, but like I guess what is your intention with your art? Where does it
Well, art is like magic, hard to define. That's actually more hard to define than magic is, but I would say that magic is inherently creative and creativity is inherently magical. So they're kind of two sides of the same coin. But for me, with my art, I try to communicate and express the sort of abstract and nuanced experiences that I've had that have been life-changing, revelatory, peak experiences through psychedelics, through ritual, through ceremony, through meditation. I've experienced a lot of rarefied states of consciousness through my deep exploration of different spiritual traditions and shamanic techniques and magical techniques. And having had these experiences, I then try to communicate them to other people because I think that there's some of the most interesting and compelling experiences I've ever had in my entire life. And also some of these experiences kind of they bring up poignant questions just about reality and the human condition in general. And I think that a lot of people out there are dealing with a huge amount of existential angst and just despair over feeling lost. And these kinds of experiences and techniques, following these interests, have really helped me forge a deeper connection with myself. And I just try to encourage that for other people. And I think fostering creativity is also one of the deepest and most reliable ways of doing that, to help people connect with deeper aspects of themselves.
And so what would like really though entail like a magical, I guess, ritual or technique that wouldn't be like, say you use psychedelics or you meditate, but why bring in this element of magic too? What is, I guess, the purpose of that?
It depends on your worldview. There's a lot of different perspectives on what magic is and how magic works. Traditional cultures tend to have an animistic perspective, which is that the universe is inherently alive. It's filled with spirits that are intangible or imperceptible to our normal means of perception. And when you do magic, you're interfacing with this larger spiritual ecosystem that enables you to have greater efficacy in the world, to basically be able to, it's like a luck accelerator, if you want to look at it that way. I think that magic also fits well into a kind of more modern psychological paradigm. And I have, no qualms wherever people stand on the spectrum of what they are open to believe or not. And it's basically an understanding that life responds in large part to our ideas about ourselves. And we act out a form of confirmation bias, and this manifests in circumstances, right? So we might actually attract to us circumstances that confirm our ideas about ourselves and reality. Magic is kind of a way of brainwashing and programming ourselves through kind of these poeticized rituals that enable us to then rewrite our ideas of ourselves, of reality. And in some cases, you can experiment with this. You actually find that our world does seem to shift as a result of doing these kinds of things. There are also ways traditionally, following specific magical esoteric traditions, ways of codifying and kind of poeticizing mysteries, spiritual truths that can't quite be communicated in words. They need to be experienced for people to have deeper levels of understanding of reality, the cosmos, and the kind of divine play that we find ourselves in. So participating in magic rituals is one way to be able to forge a deeper level of understanding, to expand and widen one's perception. And meditation, as you mentioned, as well as the use of psychedelics, both have a deep precedent within the magic traditions. And for me, I did explore meditation in a Buddhist context and have done so very thoroughly. But the first book I ever read on meditation was an Aleister Crowley book. And actually, it was through the esoteric tradition of the West. And Crowley has a lot of dissenters, and I'm not necessarily advocating for his behavior or his personality, but he was one of the most prolific and brilliant writers on magic and mysticism in the 20th century. And his instructions on meditation for me at the time were very instrumental and very clear. And they helped forge a good foundation for me to then explore other paths like Buddhism and things like that.
He seems to be one of the first people to really understand kind of the viral character, that what really like cuts through a society or people's radar is not necessarily what is comfortable or easy, but it showed up, on the Sgt. Pepper's cover and Led Zeppelin and all this other stuff, that it just wormed its way through society. And like that understanding of virality is like, now it's everywhere. Like people do things,
Yeah.
and it's like you wonder if you wonder nowadays with all these people in the media, like if they're really putting their real personality on, or they're just doing what is gonna get shares or likes or whatever. And I was thinking before we talked about like I don't have many magic books actually. I think right now I only have two books that I would consider magic. I don't know if you know these teachings of Don Carlos. It's like the exercises of Carlos Castaneda, and then the new living Kabbalah. It's will self.
Okay,
No,
I haven't heard of that.
sorry, Will Parfit. It's just a general overview of like Hermetic Kabbalah, but I wanted to hear from you, like, what would you consider? You mentioned Crowley, but do you think Crowley's good for people that are just getting into this kind of stuff? Because he seems very difficult in a lot of ways. Do you have like any, like, like your top 5 getting started with magic books, or more accessible than Crowley, I guess?
Yeah. I think that to most modern readers, Crowley is not the most accessible place to start. And he kind of assumes a lot of knowledge and part of the reader. Actually, a lot of the books were written specifically as student curricula only for initiated people or people that were already trained in the system. So it makes the kind of outsider, it makes it difficult to comprehend for kind of like an outsider. But there are some Crowley books that are pretty accessible. The first book of book 4 is a very accessible book on meditation technique, and it's very clear and simplistic, as well as a book that he wrote called Liber E that's very short and goes into fundamentals on Raja Yoga and things like that. And, he was a technical writer, and he was also a philosopher, and his work spans a lot of different, it goes off on all kinds of crazy tangents and down all different kinds of roads. So it depends what you're referring to specifically. But when it comes to just in general exploring magic, and magic for me has a pretty broad definition. Like you mentioned, shamanism is somewhat encapsulated by magic, as well as the Eastern esoteric traditions like Buddhism, Taoism, etc. I really enjoy a book called High Magic by Damien Eccles. Damien is well known for being a survivor of false accusation. He was on death row for 18 years. But while he was in prison, he spent a huge amount of time studying and practicing magic. And he wrote a few really phenomenal books, the first of which was called High Magic. And it's just a great beginner-friendly guide to getting into ceremonial magic, the kind of stuff that Crowley would teach. But like you mentioned, the language that Crowley might use is a lot more complicated than how Damien describes it. So that's a great book to recommend. And then, like my kind of formative books for spiritual practice in general were by Ram Dass, Be Here Now, or Grist for the Mill, or Jack Kornfield is a phenomenal meditation teacher who was a Buddhist monk for 20 years. He's written a lot of amazing books like A Path with Heart or The Wise Heart. I really think if you're interested in this stuff, you can't go wrong with developing a firm foundation in meditation practice before kind of getting into the more complex stuff.
Yeah, I could see that. And I know the first time I did psychedelics, I'd been meditating for a few years, and it helped enormously. I think
I think that makes a huge difference. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Nice. So you're living in Bali. What brought that about?
It's just an amazing place to live. I first came to Bali because I used to, before the world became so locked down, I used to travel the world and exhibit my art in different countries and live paint at psychedelic music festivals. And I did a tour in Australia. And after I finished my tour, it was very inexpensive to travel from Bali, or from Australia to Bali. I didn't really have any plans after the tour, so I decided to come, and I was going to stay for 6 weeks and just ended up staying for initially 6 months. Then I left back to the United States and went off on some other journeys through South America and different places, and eventually came back to Bali to work as a tattoo artist. And that was 3 years ago. And I'm not tattooing much anymore, but I've chosen to live here just because it's a really beautiful place to be, and it's a low cost of living, high quality of life, a lot of interesting conscious people, and the culture, the kind of native culture to Bali is really powerful, really distinct, and very inspiring for me as an artist.
Huh. Have you, is it difficult to get a long-term visa to do that?
It's not particularly difficult.
Huh.
And I think people can visit an Indonesian embassy, because Bali is part of Indonesia, to request information on how to do that. But I have a long-term visa, and so do most of the people that live here as expats.
Nice.
It seems pretty accessible.
I went to Java like 10 years ago, but I do remember the visa process didn't seem like, some countries it's very difficult. It didn't seem that difficult it was like a 1 month just tourist visit. But yeah, I could see, I want to go to Bali though. It does interest me. If I don't know when that'll be possible again, but it does. Do you, how much do you speak any Balinese or Indonesian?
Almost none.
Wow.
And it's not particularly necessary, because Bali has its pockets of primarily expat communities, businesses owned by and for expats. And this supports the local economy, because the local economy primarily runs off tourism. And so they've been quite hurt by the circumstances with the limitations on travel. But yeah, so I do have friends within the Balinese communities, but they're a little bit worlds apart. The expats that live here, including myself, and kind of the local people, they don't necessarily run too much in the same circles.
I've studied some Indonesian too. It's a very, because that's kind of one of my hobbies, I guess, is different languages. But I don't know how much it's spoken in Indonesia, but Indonesian is such a fun language. It's very, I don't know, it's very bouncy. I guess the feeling of of different languages in your head is, so yeah, if you have the opportunity, I would never live in a place again where at least it's just so, it opens up a place so much. But
Sure.
I don't know. Yeah, but I know
I hear it's very easy to learn. It has a small number of vocabulary compared to other languages.
compared to any other
maybe
Asian,
someday.
any other Asian language is it's the easiest one by far that I because it's Roman script and just yeah, even like Vietnamese has all these weird diacritical marks. It's nothing. It's just straight. And it's
Hmm.
but anyways, so you're doing this interview show like this, I guess.
Yeah.
What have been your I guess like what have how has that been overall?
Oh, it's been amazing. I mean, for one thing, I really love having these types of intentional conversations where you can go really deep into a subject that I'm really interested by. And I've, had the opportunity to speak to people who have been really influential to me. And it's amazing that people are willing to take the time to come and talk to me. And I try to ask questions that are, I think, of universal interest, but it's still a way for me to essentially get like a one-on-one tutoring session almost from people who are experts in fields that I'm interested in researching. And I love also, because I'm a big reader, to be able to connect with authors of books that I've read and to talk to them about their work after having read a book, as well as artists that I've been fans of for a long time, things like that. So it's been really amazing, to talk to geniuses all over the world.
Yeah, I mean that's what I'm constantly thinking about who do I want and who can I get and like this kind of mix, but also it is very magical because you're kind of choosing the direction of your thought and anybody who's watching it. So I think the people I'm always asking like who interests me the most and like what can I ask them? And I'm always asking questions that I would genuinely want to know, like regardless of recording this. Like I'm that's why I'm asking about Bali. Like I've never been there, but I'd like to go and so on. But
Sure.
nice. Well, I'm
Well,
hoping to do.
something I've discovered is kind of like anything I'm curious about, I'm sure people that listen to my podcast are also interested in. So any question you have that's of a genuine place of curiosity, I'm sure other people are kind of thinking the same questions and want them asked.
Right. Yeah. I did come across. I found myself looking at like just people online and like thinking, oh, I wonder. I bet they would be interesting. But I'm like, I don't know if this really interests me. So like, I don't want to ask somebody on just because I think I can get them on. I like
Mhm.
I want actually people that interest me. So your art, like, is if you don't mind, I'll show some of the art, like your
Sure,
art
yeah.
beforehand, because it's very powerful stuff, I think. And so, when did you start doing that? It's all painting or it's digital?
I do both digital and painting.
Okay, and
And
how long have you been doing that?
I mean, I've been basically making art for my whole life. I started, as an early teenager, getting really into it. It was kind of like as I was finding myself as an adolescent, as a teenager, I found art, kind of latched onto that as like, oh wow, this is like what I do. This is who I am. So it's kind of a quite deeply ingrained and wrapped up in my ego, my personal identity of who I believe I am in the world.
Nice. And I guess this is more of the marketing end of things. Like, how did you kind of build that Instagram audience? That's a pretty hefty audience.
Uh, I'm not sure. I mean, I used to show my art a lot, at different music festivals, and did that pretty nonstop, like electronic music events and music festivals for like 8 years, maybe. So, and there's a big community and kind of scene around that and around Burning Man and psychedelic music culture festival and visionary art. So I think most of my audience just kind of grew out of that, and it seems to be just kind of steadily growing. And I try not to pay too much attention to it. There's always somebody who has a million more followers than me, and there's always some amazing artist who has like none. So it doesn't really necessarily mean too much, but I guess it does open doors in a
Right.
career capacity.
Yeah, yeah. And you've done you do classes, right?
Mhm.
And
I'm actually starting a course in just a few weeks. I'm teaching a 12-week course on creativity. It's called Unleash Your Inner Artist, and it's me and a group of 14 other world-renowned artists, musicians, songwriters, painters, tattoo artists, all different kinds of professional creative people. And we're going to help guide a group into basically how do you get in touch with your creativity and how do you get rid of the blocks? What's like stopping you from being this artist that you dreamed to be. And we did it for the first time last year, and it was really, really powerful. It seems like some of the students that did it last year are going to be taking it again. And I'm really stoked for it. It's going to
Nice,
be life-changing.
nice, nice. Well, I think, yeah, this is, I don't know what I would recommend people start with, your videos or your art, but I guess you can do both. I mean, I found the interviews first because I think, I don't know, I'm trying to remember who I was looking for. I think, no, I don't remember who it was, but I just saw all these, these interviews, and like you interview so many interesting people. Like I feel like it's very diverse, and what I'm finding with these interviews is that each one, like I read a lot of Robert Anton Wilson when I was younger, and he talks about reality tunnels, and
Cool.
like each one of these is like
Yeah.
I'm entering somebody. I try not to. I don't want it to be about me. I want to like hear from other people because I need to shut up and just listen. So like I want to hear these different. Everybody's so different, and I don't know, that to me that's the fascinating. That's why I said this is like magic for me. It's all these different worlds are opening up. So yeah.
Sure. Yeah, and like the more people that have a kind of interview channel, it's like boosting the signal for each other, right? And you know what kind of inspired me is like I had the idea to do podcasting for a while, but I started looking at some of like Joe Rogan's really early podcasts, and I was just like, man, like this dude started at nowhere. If you look at like the first 100 or 200 episodes that Joe Rogan did, it was like, man, if this guy can make it as such a huge like podcaster, I can do it. Like anybody can do it. It's just about staying consistent with it over a long period of time and kind of like putting in the hours to refine the skill of doing it. But seeing that and seeing how kind of like unprofessional it was actually really inspired me to be like, yeah, I can do that.
Yeah, persistence is, so many people give up. That's like they start and they don't keep going with it. And I think just, yeah, keep going and adapt, like try different things. And I'm not a pro at it either, but yeah, I haven't done podcasting. Like, I mean, I haven't turned these into podcasts. I'm just doing videos for now, but it's an idea because yeah, I've spoken with several podcasters. Anyway, what other questions do I have? I think those are the main things I want to talk about. Uh, oh, this is kind of something I did want to ask. Like, what have been like the, I guess, key? Like, have there been any like key moments, decisions in your life that you have been like the best decisions or the worst decisions, like that have just like totally turned a corner in your life? Like, because I always like to hear about things like that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, I was like a miserable kid in high school. After going to an art exhibition of one of my kind of like hero artists who's also been a friend of mine for a long time, Android Jones, seeing his art at that gallery, I was like, I need to get out of high school at all costs. So I decided to like drop out of high school, I think 2 years early, and went to art school like right off the bat. I just knew I needed to get out and into an environment that I felt resonant with. That was a huge decision. And then I dropped out of art school to go to Burning Man and just like, live like a crazy hippie for a while, just, like a psychedelic cowboy, taking an unhealthy and definitely unwise amount of psychedelic drugs and going to music festivals all the time and like making art nonstop. And that was also like an amazing decision. So if you have the opportunity to go to Burning Man, definitely do. Yeah, it was a big one. I don't know. I mean, like life is just all decisions, right? So it's like every day new decisions that we have to make, and those open up, like you said, reality tunnels. Like there's all these infinite potentials. Every single time we make a decision, we're grappling with infinity, right? And like narrowing we're selecting a quantum timeline, and that's a lot of responsibility. But yeah, I mean, it's all perfect, right? It's all like whether an experience leads to something pleasant or unpleasant, there's always something valuable you can gain from it, some kind of lesson, some sort of key insight or experience that you need to lead you towards the fulfillment of your ultimate purpose and destiny, which is, I believe, the track we're all on collectively.
Yeah, yeah. You said you grew up in San Francisco?
Yeah.
Huh.
I grew up in the Bay Area. I grew up in Mill Valley, which is just next to San Francisco. But after I left high school, I went to school in San Francisco and moved there eventually.
Nice. I actually moved there when I was 21 and like from Orange County. So it was like a very big jump, I could see. But
Hmm.
do you consider that like I mean, the last time I lived there was like 3 or 4 years ago, and it's changed so much since then. Like I feel like a lot of the artists have been pushed out. Like it's so
Yeah.
like, do you feel like that was a key part? Is that a key part of your identity, or is it just kind of like a part of your past now?
Yeah, I mean, what you said, San Francisco has changed significantly. When I was living there, there was way more of a kind of like Burning Man, creative, bohemian, psychedelic scene that was really, really cool. And yeah, a lot of those, almost all those people left, unfortunately. So yeah, that was definitely a formative time. I missed that time in a way. Kind of was like a moment in history that kind of came and went that will probably never be recaptured or recreated in the same way again.
Oh,
But I mean, for me, I've lived all over the place. I've lived abroad, not only in Bali, but in several places. And that's definitely been a traveling and living in foreign places has definitely been a really formative experience for me, and highly recommend people to get out and to expand their horizons and see the world if they can.
yeah. I think it's sort of like before you even do psychedelics, or just meditate and travel, and that'll blow your mind in a lot of ways. And then when you get to
Can't go
psychedelics,
wrong with those things. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Cool, man. Well, I do urge people to check out your channel. I think I'm out of questions for now, but I liked hearing about all this stuff. It's fascinating stuff to me, and like I said, I'm just like tip of the iceberg with what I consider magic. I'm more of a dabbler, I guess. But cool, man. Well, I'll put a link down below to all your stuff, and I hope people check it out. I think it's a pretty amazing art, and the interviews are very fascinating, and I look forward to what you have coming in the future.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I mean, as what you said about dabbling, there's this funny Jack Cornfield quote that I think of sometimes, which is, you need to remember your Buddha nature and your zip code. You know, it's like, it's important to not confuse the planes, as Crowley would say, but to keep your, you know, like maintain your connection to the real world, as well as to explore the numinous, uncharted dimensions of our infinite collective psyches or whatever. Got to do
Nice.
both.
Well, go to everybody go to his channel if you want to you know, check out the other stuff too. It's all
Cool.
real.
Yeah,
All
thanks
right.
for having me, man.